Hi, I'm Dr. Versalati, and in this screencast we're going to go over item indices, reviewing one of the guidelines for creating strong multiple choice question test items. So the first three guidelines designing each test item to measure a single objective, stating the STEM and the options as simply and directly as possible, and make certain that the intended answer is clearly the only one, was covered in a previous screencast. This screencast, we're going to focus on the item indices to accept, discard, or revise items. This one is the guideline that we would use after we have given the exam and we see the student results. The first three should be done before we use the exam. Okay, so the item indices that we're going to cover are item facility, item discrimination, and distractor efficiency. We're going to look at each one in turn. Item facility is how easy, or we can think about it as how difficult the test item is. And the formula is just taking the number of students who answered the item correctly divided by the total number of students who answered the item. So it's pretty straightforward to do the math. Let's think about this. So if 25 of the you have 25 students and 25 of them got one question correct, if we did the math, that would be 1.0 or 100%. Of the students answered it correctly. It would be a very easy test item for the test facility, the easiness of it, how easy it is. And the opposite of that would be if 0 students got it correct. 0 out of 25.00, 0% of the students answered correctly. So if this happens, you write a test and you give it, and all of the students get it correct. That does give us some information. We know that all the students know that the right answer. They know that information of what was being assessed. But we do have to ask, is that maybe too easy, right? Because the point of test items is to differentiate between students who know the information and those who don't. Same with, I think it's more clear if 0 out of 25 students answered correctly, that question might be too difficult for this context. Maybe it wasn't covered accidentally, or maybe it was confusing in some way, shape, or form. That test item certainly gives information. We probably want to reteach that if that is important, or you might want to exclude that from your test. You might just want to not count that as one of the questions. Now, what about if it's a little bit different? What if 24 out of 25 students get it correct, which if you do the math, that's 0.96 or 96% of the students answered it correctly. Is that too easy? Maybe. But maybe it's fine, especially if that's the first question or the second question. We want to help our students start with success, right? We want them to build some confidence because taking a test is anxiety producing. So if we start with a question that most or even all students can get correctly, that can set them up to feel good about the next question and the next question, and we can measure their ability. But what if only one of the students gets an item correct? Is that too difficult, right? Again, 2 divided by 25 would be 0.08. Only 8% of the students answered it correctly. Is that too difficult? It might be. It sounds quite difficult. We might also want to consider how many test items there are, right? If there's only 5 test items and only one person out of 25 gets it correct, you probably don't want to continue using that question. You might want to discard it from that measurement. But if there's 30, maybe the top 8% students get it, maybe that's okay. So there's no cutoff of where the item facility should be definitely tell you what to do. You have to think about how it works in your teaching context and in your whole assessment portfolio, all the ways that you assess the learners. Test discrimination is simply how well does that particular test item distinguish the high scorers from the low scorers. Generally, we want items to distinguish students who know the information from those who don't yet know the information. And the students who score higher on the exam should get that item correct if it's distinguishing the high and the low learners. So let's look at this formula. This formula is just a little bit more complicated, but not much. You just take the number, you split your learners into 3 groups. Let's say you have 30 students. You're going to split it into the top 1/3, which would be 10 students, the middle third, which would be 10 students, and the bottom third, the bottom 10. And you just figure out, tally how many of the top students got that item correct and how many of the low scoring, the bottom 10 students got that item correct. You're going to subtract the number correct by the top students minus the number correct by the low scorers, and then you're going to take half of the total and divide it. Let's look at this example. So using that formula, we have 8 students in the top 10 that got it correct, minus 2 students in the bottom 10 that got it correct. That equals 6. And then you take we have 20 students we're considering. We're going to cut that in half, and that's 10. So 6 divided by 10 is 0.60. So the item discrimination for this hypothetical test item 14 is 0.60. Higher item discrimination is better, but we don't expect it to be exactly perfect, 1.0. 0.60 and 0.50 is moderate. It's totally fine. It's totally acceptable. If we just take a step back from those numbers and think, yeah, of the top 10 students, 8 got this item correct. Some of the bottom 10 students got it correct, but more didn't. That kind of makes sense. That is discriminating. Now let's look at this example. What if on item 15, only 4 of the top 10 students got it correct, and 6 of the top 10, the students who were the top scorers got it incorrect, and of the low scoring, the bottom 10 students on this exam, only 2 got it. 2 did get it correct and 8 got it incorrect. If we do the formula, we see that it has an item discrimination of only 0.20. Does this item distinguish students who know the material from the students who don't? Well, not really, because it's only 4 got it right because it's so difficult, but even 2 of the bottom 10 got it correct. So doing well generally doesn't seem that relevant for this particular test item. This is probably too low. But again, there's no rules, right? It's just something for you to think about and think about what's going on with that test item. And maybe the next guideline will help you figure that out. So although the first 2 we might not do every time we give an exam, we should always look at this. This is called distractor efficiency. And this just means let's review which of our options in the multiple choice were chosen. And we do this to figure out, did the incorrect options all get chosen? Who chose those items? And are the distractors evenly chosen? Again, the goal of the distractors is to give us diagnostic information. When a learner chooses an incorrect item, it can let the instructor know what information is not yet understood or is understood in a shallow way. So let's look at these. So in this test item, there were 5 choices. We're going to separate the high scoring students from the low scoring students, just like an item discrimination. And we can see with A, 0 of the high scoring students chose that, but 3 of the low scoring did. And for B, 1 of the high scoring students chose that distractor, but 5 of the low scoring students did. So we can see that for both A and B, the distractors, some students chose them, and it gives us information about what those particular students might need to review, maybe with a little intervention or mini lesson or group discussion. And we can see that for C, this is the right answer. It's really great because C is correct, and it's most of these 20 students, 9 students chose the correct answer. That's good. And more of the high scoring students chose it. So looking at D, no students chose option D of the for this test item. It didn't fool anyone, so it doesn't give us any information. So this analysis suggests that maybe that option should be changed to something that is plausible. And if you can't come up with another plausible answer for diagnostic purposes, maybe just exclude it. Don't have so many options. Now let's look at E. What is happening here? None of the low scoring students thought E was the right answer, but 2 of the top scorers on the exam thought that E was correct. What does that indicate? Well, that is probably a big red flag to think about what might be triggering that. Maybe there is some higher level thinking that these top students are doing that is over the head of the low scoring students. And so you might want to think about maybe there's something incorrect with that test item. And again, this is something you can do just for all the time to see what students are misunderstanding, what interventions might be necessary, maybe pairing students that have the who know the right answer and can explain it, maybe pairing students who struggle with the same thing and do an intervention. Remember, all these multiple choice items are to diagnose what is not yet understood. Okay, so item facility, item discrimination, distractor efficiency. Remember that it's not just the numbers we're looking at, it's thinking about what it means in the particular teaching context. For instance, we might be okay with an easy question in the beginning. And even though we might not do item facility and item discrimination all the time, it's good for instructors to understand these ideas. And we should always consider item distractor efficiency to think about how the next time we give the exam, if we use the same exam, what might work better and be more informative.